This is Trey. As I've said over the past few months, we've been creating new episodes for the fall. And we've got one, maybe two more episodes before we get to the new material this fall. As we roll out today's encore episode, I think it would be good to offer a little context. Love it or hate it, it's football season. And it looks like we're in for another year of the nation focusing more on what happens before the kickoff than the bone-crunching action on the field. Even if you don't know a free safety from a tight end or a punt from a squib kick, you've probably heard about a silent protest that quarterback Colin Kapernick started back in the 2016 season.
This morning, the spotlight on football star Colin Kaepernick for taking a stand by refusing to stand. The San Francisco 49ers quarterback remaining seated during the playing of the national anthem at 3 preseason games, a protest, he says, over police brutality against African Americans. Kaepernick saying in an
And a year later, President Trump bumped the controversy up another notch in a speech he made at a rally in Alabama.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired!
A few days later, as stadiums full of fans stood for the national anthem, hundreds of teammates locked arms, some standing, some sitting or kneeling, in defiance of the president's attempt to sow division among players. Fans, however, weren't necessarily united in support of the players. The controversy simmered throughout the 2017 season, into the playoffs, the Super Bowl, and into the offseason. This spring, the NFL owners announced that players will no longer be allowed to kneel during the national anthem. And if they did, they could face punishment, and their team could be fined. The NFL brass provided players a little wiggle room. If they don't wish to stand or salute the flag, they're welcome to hang out in the locker room until the anthem is over. That was the NFL's new policy. But then they backed away from it after the Players Association filed a grievance, saying the new policy infringed on the players' rights because the league announced the rule without consulting the players' union. So this year, at the beginning of the league's first preseason games, several players took a knee, raised a fist, or stayed off the field until after the anthem played. It'll be interesting to see if the league chooses to punish these players and teams. So, once again this fall, along with athletic competition, we're going to experience a tense fissure in American society. On one side, Americans aligned with Donald Trump's vision for a certain brand of patriotism. And on the other side, Americans who value freedom of expression and don't believe their love of country is something that should be measured by compulsory public demonstrations of national pride. But Colin Kaepernick isn't the first professional athlete to stand up or kneel for his beliefs. Muhammad Ali, for example, was an outspoken activist. When drafted for military service during the Vietnam War, he refused. Back then, at a college campus rally, he confronted a student about white draft dodgers.
I'm saying you talking about me about some draft, and all of you white boys are breaking your neck to get to Switzerland and Canada and London. I'm not going to help nobody get something my Negroes don't have. If I'm going to die, I'll die now, right here fighting you. If I'm going to die, you my enemy. My enemy is the white people, not Viet Congs or Chinese or Japanese. You my opposer when I want freedom. You my opposer when I want justice. You my opposer when I want equality. You won't even stand up for me in America for my religious beliefs, and you want me to go somewhere and fight, but you won't even stand up for me here at home.
Ali declared himself a conscientious objector, but was arrested nonetheless for refusing conscription. He was stripped of his heavyweight title and barred from boxing for 3 years. He fought the case and lost, but on appeal to the United States Supreme Court, his conviction was overturned. Today, with a fair measure of hindsight, we see this stance as a demonstration of courage, determination, and a principled stand for one's beliefs. President Trump, however, asserts that an NFL player kneeling silently in a call for justice is disrespecting America's military. But as we've seen before, the president is nothing if not inconsistent in his criticism or praise. After Muhammad Ali died in 2016, then candidate Donald Trump reflected on his legacy on Fox News.
He was a fantastic guy. He was really two different people. He was the nicest guy in the world outside of the ring, and inside the ring he was this incredible competitor. He was really something special. Muhammad certainly was one of the great people of the world, and I think it's fantastic.
Now, clearly, no one is going to remember Muhammad Ali as anything but the greatest, whether that be humanitarian or heavyweight champion of the world. But President Trump should be able to recognize the differences in how much Ali and Kaepernick's statements actually do or do not disrespect the country, as well as the similarity in the cost meted out for their principled protests. Just as Ali missed out on 3 years of boxing during his prime for his anti-war stance, Colin Kaepernick was unsigned to any team during the 2017 season. But unlike Ali, it doesn't look like Kaepernick will ever have a chance for a comeback. No team even gave him a tryout before this upcoming season. Kaepernick has filed a grievance against the NFL saying the teams are colluding in not signing him. But at the time when Muhammad Ali refused to serve in the Vietnam War, America was in the midst of the civil rights movement. Among the movement's goals to achieve racial equality, having a black starting quarterback in the NFL was probably not very high on their list of priorities. Which gets us to this week's episode. In January 1967, the very first NFL Super Bowl matchup was between Green Bay and Kansas City.
The Super Bowl is underway.
Packers led by quarterback Bart Starr and Chiefs Len Dawson, both of whom are white. Although there were black players in the NFL, it wasn't until 1969 that one would be named at the beginning of the season to the position of starting quarterback. Throughout the history of the NFL Super Bowl, the quarterback position was held by an African American only 7 times. Most recently, Carolina Panthers' Cam Newton was the 6th black quarterback to start a Super Bowl back in 2016. He was preceded by Russell Wilson, Colin Kaepernick, Donovan McNabb, and Steve McNair. Seattle Seahawks' Russell Wilson started in 2 Super Bowls. He won one of them, which made him the 2nd African-American quarterback to win a Super Bowl.
Wilson to put it up. He's hit 7 different receivers and now cuts. What a catch! Touchdown!
The first black QB to win the Super Bowl was Doug Williams, who led the Washington Redskins to victory back in 1988.
Williams deep for Sanders again. Makes the catch at the 10. Touchdown! Oh.
And in so many ways, this was a big, big deal. From West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX, this is Us and Them. It's the podcast where we explore America's cultural divides. I'm Trey Kay. For this show, we're going to look at some football. Not so much the rah-rah, testosterone-amped, man-crunching man aspects of the game, which drive a multi-billion-dollar sports entertainment industry. We're more interested in how the game has played a role in America's civil rights movement. As I mentioned before, Doug Williams was the first African-American quarterback to win a Super Bowl. This was a proud day for many African-Americans. But that's not the story we're telling today. We're going to talk about another guy who was sitting among the 73,000 fans watching Williams that day. Another black NFL player who also has a significant story in the history of the sport.
I'm James Harris, former NFL player.
James Harris and Doug Williams are both alums of Grambling State, the historically black public university in Louisiana. And though their NFL careers began almost a decade apart, they both trained under Grambling's legendary head coach, Eddie Robinson.
Doug Williams One of the things I was most proud of was to see him win the Super Bowl. Coach Robinson and myself was present at the Super Bowl. It was a big, enjoyable night for all of us.
In 1969, nearly 20 years before Doug Williams' landmark Super Bowl performance, James Harris was drafted by the Buffalo Bills. And after the Bills training camp, he became the first black player in the history of the NFL to earn a job as starting quarterback. This was a goal Coach Robinson had set for Harris when he recruited him out of high school. Harris's coming of age as a player, first as a high school state champion in Louisiana, then at Grambling, coincided with the civil rights movement.
Growing up in the South, and my father was a preacher, you go into church each and every Sunday. And I remember looking at a sermon where every man is created equal. It's difficult to understand that when you're riding on the back of the bus, drinking out of black and white water fountains. It's difficult at a young age for you really to understand that. And it's even difficult when you go to college as an 18-year-old to understand the opportunities in America when getting good paying jobs, the opportunities to become executives in the country. You look at all the magazines, there are no black governors, there are no black presidents, and there are not even any black quarterbacks.
College football was a huge part of the system of segregation in the South.
That's Sam Friedman. He's an author and professor at the Columbia Journalism School.
It wasn't that college football was segregated just incidentally because everything else, movie theaters, bus stations, water fountains, public restrooms, hotels, were segregated. College football was one of the pillars of segregation because if you think back into the 1950s or 1960s, there's virtually no pro sports south of the Mason-Dixon line. I mean, there's no pro baseball at that time south of St. Louis or Washington. Pro football franchises are just beginning to open up in the Sun Belt in the mid-60s. There's no pro basketball in the South. So college football was the regnant sport of the South. But it's also so culturally important in the South. It was so totally conflated with segregation.
Friedman chronicles James Harris's career from Grambling to the NFL in his book Breaking the Line, a history of college football at historically black institutions during the Civil Rights Movement.
Breaking the color barrier at quarterback in pro football was maybe the single most important act of desegregation in American sports because quarterback as a position and the opposition to blacks playing quarterback was completely tied into the most vile stereotypes that went with notions of white supremacy and black inferiority. Because a quarterback, I think, has to be the most cerebral position in any sport. If you look at a typical college or pro playbook, it's gigantic. It's like the thickest encyclopedia volume on your shelf and then some. And the quarterback has to absorb not only all of his own roles on any given play, but he has to know what every other person on the offense is doing at the same time because he has to be able to correct mistakes by teammates. He has to be able to analyze the defenses that he sees, and then he has to take this knowledge and, like a jazz musician, adapt it under changing improvisational circumstances during the game.
See the man coming from behind. He knew he had to get rid of it. Somehow he felt the presence of that man, fired the shot, threw it in hard to Don Warren. He couldn't handle it, but he did avoid the sack and also avoid an interception.
This time working across the middle. Look at him survey the entire field, starting at his right and coming back, and Gary Clark just wide open on the play, but some kind of afternoon so far.
From a young age, James Harris was confident in his physical abilities, mental toughness, and creativity. There was no problem there. He believed he could compete with anyone. But the dream of playing quarterback in the NFL just didn't seem realistic at that time. Thinking about it seemed insurmountable in a culture of segregation where many believed that the black man was mentally inferior.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia,
Dr. King's iconic speech had a profound impact on James Harris, who was barely 16 years old.
will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
In 1963, when Dr. Martin Luther King made that speech. You know, our country was changing, and we, as young people in high school, could see that.
Will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
When he said that one day we'll be judged by the content of our character and not the color of our skin, it kind of registered with me, and it was one of the things that moving forward, there may be a chance that I get a chance to play quarterback in the NFL.
And from a young age, was it your goal to be a professional football player?
Not at first. At first, like any young kid, I was just kind of searching for a path for me. And I tried some other things, but it wasn't long before, after trying the cotton field and after some summer jobs, mowing yards and, you know, seeing those things and observing other people, that I realized that most of the people who went to college were successful. So I considered college, and that caused me to start, you know, really working on my academics and getting myself prepared. Of course, you know, most parents didn't have the money. A lot of people were going to the Army because that was an alternative, and our families needed support, so other kids were getting a job, you know, right out of college. So college was something I'd heard about, didn't quite know about it, and it's something my mother really wanted me to do, was to go to college.
So James Harris was known as Shaq, a nickname given to him by his minister father, derived from the brave Meshach from the book of Daniel in the Bible. Shaq had been rocking it as a high school athlete. He led his team to a 25-game winning streak and a state championship for Black Louisiana schools. At the time, the school system in Monroe, Louisiana was still resisting desegregation. Shaq's team beat the state champions of Arkansas and Mississippi, and he was named All-State twice. This caught the eye of Coach Robinson at Grambling, who had a unique recruiting style.
He came in with a suit, tie. Well, a lot of coaches came in with kind of golf shirts on, and he was an English major, spoke very well, and he also came in with his Bible. So,
well, what did that mean? I mean,
well, it was a very impressive image for my parents because, you know, I lived in the Bible Belt. My mother was very religious, and she had said that she didn't care where I go. She just wanted a college degree, but that was an impression upon her. Not only did he bring his Bible in, he and my mother sit down and read verses together. And he said very little to me sometimes, and they would talk, and she started cooking for him because he was coming over almost every night. And, you know, the one thing he left my mother with when he was leaving, that if she gave him an opportunity to coach her son, he would coach him like his very own, that he would guarantee that I get a college degree, that I would go to church on Sunday, and that when I graduated from Grambling, that I would get a good job and make a difference.
Around this time when Coach Robinson was recruiting Shaq, he'd been to New York City and was interviewed on Howard Cosell's radio show. Cosell asked Robinson, "You've been in the profession for some 30 or 40 years, and you've had some pretty good success. Do you feel that after this long tenure of coaching, that you have the ability to train a black quarterback, a black American, who could go into the NFL?" Robinson answered yes. "Well, what do you base that on?" said Cosell. Robinson said that he'd studied every great coach since 1941. And if anybody could coach a quarterback, he believed that he could. On the flight back to Louisiana, Coach Robinson couldn't get Cosell's question out of his head. Before driving back to the airport, he paid a visit to Shaq Harris's home.
He told me what Howard Cosell had asked him, and he said that in 4 years, you know, America was changing, and the NFL would be ready for a quarterback. And that when I came to Grambling and finished in 4 years, I would get an opportunity to play quarterback. And he would show Howard Cosell that we can produce a quarterback.
In 1967, legendary sports journalists Jerry Eisenberg and Howard Cosell produced a documentary, Grambling College, 100 Yards to Glory, which featured Eddie Robinson's football program at the historically black college.
Get the offensive team. Come on. We're whipping ourselves, man.
In this scene, it's Grambling's homecoming against Texas Southern. Coach Robinson tries to buck up an offensive line that hasn't been protecting their quarterback, number 14, James Harris.
Now, look, we cry about the other people holding us. You're going to have to block him. We practice each day. You got to block him, and you got to stay with him. You can't block him and turn around. You're going to have to hit him and stay with him. Dance with him. You know we work on it, so let's dance with him. You can't just say, well, you're in my area this time. When he comes in there, knock him down. This tells him not to come in there anymore. We are not in the ball game.
At the end of the game, Grambling beat Texas Southern 20-14. Although Coach Robinson had every expectation that James Harris was going to be the first black quarterback in the pros, the road was not going to be like that of white players. Grambling didn't have the amenities that all of the wealthy, mostly white colleges had. Here's author Sam Friedman.
The stadiums were small, so at a place like Grambling, the stadium might seat 12,000 people. If it's Alabama or University of Florida, University of Georgia, the stadium might seat 70,000 people. And just to get from place to place during years of segregation was an incredibly difficult thing for these teams and their coaches. There's a time when Grambling goes up to play Tennessee State. They have to make a food stop at a black-owned insurance company in Memphis so they can eat in the employee cafeteria. They could never stay in motels. You'd get to the other team's campus and you'd stay maybe in the rafters of the gym, or you'd stay in a basement of a dorm, something like that. There was no way to stay in a public facility.
We had the gym motel. We had the barn motel. We had the stadium motel. So we had our hotel. You go to other school, you put your carts under the stadium, or they have a barn and put your carts in there, or, in the gym, we'd all stay together. But that's all we knew. And at that time, we enjoyed our college life. We felt that we had the best players in the country, and a lot of them went on to make NFL. We were a close-knit group, got to know each other well. We played against some great players. Every team we played had great players. So that part was fun, and it helped us become closer and encourage us to stay in school. We all were there for a purpose of getting the education. Most of us were kind of first generation where our parents really wanted us to get a college education.
Although Shaq's teammates bonded while fulfilling their dreams of higher education, there was a generation gap between Coach Robinson and his players. And this was exacerbated by the heightened tensions of the civil rights movement.
We came there with chips on our shoulder. We thought America wasn't right. But Coach Robinson was a different kind of guy. If you get caught for speeding and, we said he stopped us because we're black, he would say, no, he stopped you because of speeding.
Author Sam Friedman.
Eddie Robinson grew up in totally segregated societies in which segregation seemed permanent and which segregation was enforced with, the lynching noose.
Robinson's young players and the coaching assistants were well aware of these brutal realities, but they were seeing things from a different perspective.
They've come of age with a bunch of unkept promises. They've come of age with Brown versus Board of Education. They've come of age with the March on Washington. They've come of age with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And all of these, as Martin Luther King put it in the I Have a Dream speech, these promissory notes from America that haven't been paid in full.
And this was a time when many high-profile black athletes were speaking out about social injustice and a need for change.
I think we all admired, Jim Brown, Muhammad Ali, and all those guys who took a stand because they were representing all of us and the opportunities for others to follow. But at the time, we were young. Well, Coach Robinson educated us. He wasn't the guy that wasn't for the movement. He educated us on that, and he supported the movement as well. He was just trying to keep us together. as a team and help us get a degree. He certainly knew the challenges in America.
Former NFL player James Shaq Harris. Coming up,
growing up, a lot of times when you confronted with white people, you didn't really look them in the face because they took that as a sign of disrespect or something. So we didn't grow up looking people in the eye.
I'm Trey Kay. Us and Them is supported in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation.
In difficult times, music gives us peace, brings us together, and helps heal us. It calms our nerves and brightens our days. That's why we're bringing you classic episodes of Mountain Stage on air and in our podcast. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find something that's familiar or brand new and feel the power of live music on our website, mountainstage.org.
One outgrowth of racial bias that Grambling's coach Robinson was well aware of was the practice of recruiting black quarterbacks and having them switch positions once they came into the NFL. As James Harris's college career came to an end, he and Coach Robinson pondered the odds of an NFL team giving an African American a chance to play quarterback.
The NFL knew who I was, so most people thought that I would have a chance of getting drafted to play. And when the All-Star games came around, and he tried to get me in the All-Star game, like the Senior Bowl, the Blue-Gray game was in Mobile, they wouldn't allow me to play quarterback. So that was the first sign. And then when the draft came around, it was said that I would get drafted, early. But it didn't happen. So they began to call me and ask me to switch positions. Well, at that time, I decided that I was going to play quarterback, and that was in my best interest because I had prepared myself to be a quarterback. And Coach asked me, I received some calls about you switching position, they'll draft you earlier, what you think? And we both agreed that, I should go into the NFL with an opportunity to play quarterback. So we declined to switch positions. And I kept my word, and they kept their word. So they didn't draft me the first day. And realizing that if they don't draft you the first day, you're going to get drafted the second day, you're not going to have very much opportunity to play. And all they would do is get me there and switch me to another position. And I really studied, the draft, the pro football. And at that time, I decided not to play pro football. I had a college degree, was getting my college degree. One of the things I knew I would be able to do is teach. Because early on when I decided to not switch positions out of high school, I realized by not getting exposure to play defensive back or something, or wide receiver, that I was taking a chance on playing pro football because I was going to miss all that preparation. And I drove home anyway. Coach Robinson called me and asked to talk to me. So we went out in the stadium and talked one-on-one. And that's when he said to me that he knew I could play in the NFL, but it was up to me if I wanted to play. And that if I decide to play and come back and don't make it, don't come back and say the reason you didn't make it was because you was black.
Harris was drafted late by the Buffalo Bills as a quarterback. But the possibility of getting cut loomed large.
When I got off the plane in Buffalo, New York, I just focused on doing whatever I can to be prepared to play, realizing that I may not get but one opportunity. I had to be ready for that one opportunity because they were cutting every day. And sometimes, guys got one play and they would cut you.
Perhaps the greatest challenge for Shaq Harris was preparing to lead his teammates, who were not at all like the guys he played with at Grambling.
At that time, I'd never really had a conversation with white people, other than when I was recruiting, and I was always quiet, wasn't saying much. I mean, growing up, a lot of times when you confronted with white people, you didn't really look them in the face because they took that as a sign of disrespect or something. So we didn't grow up looking people in the eye. And all of a sudden, now you got to step in this huddle, and you're supposed to, you got to show leadership, look people, in the eye and call the play distinctly. And I mean, that was a challenge because I hadn't had that type of experience.
Harris won the starting quarterback job in Buffalo, as I mentioned earlier. This made him the first black player in NFL history to start the season at quarterback. Incidentally, in the backfield with him was a rookie, O.J. Simpson. Now, a charming, affable, all-star running back like Simpson was easily accepted by white Americans. But a black guy starting as quarterback in the NFL, that was tougher to swallow.
Oh, coming from the South, you've seen it all. But I never really thought of hate mail. But I received so much hate mail that it shocked me, some of the things that just because you're playing in the NFL, but yeah, all kinds of hate mail, where they would put your face in a watermelon or have you to a tree, a lot of, the N-word connotations.
After 3 years, Shaq was released by the Bills and signed by the L.A. Rams in 1972. But the racial animus didn't die out. It only intensified. Sometimes there were credible death threats on Shaq at his hotel or at the stadium on game day. The Rams called for increased security. Harris recalls what it was like rooming with fellow quarterback Ron Jaworski, who was white.
So security was around my room, and when I went to the game, came out to town, they had some. But Jaworski was my roommate, and he's kind of funny. And when he came in, he asked me what was going on out there, and I told him. So I said, oh, man. So the next day, we end up, sometimes we ride together, but we rode in separate cars. So we just made a joke out of it that Jaworski said, well, one of us got to be there to play the game. But at the same time, I got a lot of mail of support. A lot of people supported me around the country. And when I travel, there were a lot of fans who were there to greet me and support me, and that helped as well.
Sam Friedman believes that Harris's shattering of the NFL's quarterback color barrier is one of the great untold stories in the history of the game.
Jackie Robinson had to prove two things. He had to prove that physically he was capable of playing second base at an MLB level, and he had to prove that he could withstand the race hate that was heaped upon him. And he did both of those things. But when James Harris broke the barrier at quarterback in the NFL, he had to do both of those things, show he had the physical skills, show he could withstand the race hate. But he had to do a third thing because of the nature of being quarterback. He had to show that he was the intellectual equal, if not superior, of the white players around him.
Despite real progress in today's college and pro football, Sam Friedman feels that something's been lost, too. In his book, Breaking the Line, Friedman argues that legendary coaches at historically black colleges like Eddie Robinson and Florida A&M's Jake Gaither wanted to do more than just churn out great football players. They hoped to mentor these young black men into successful leaders in their community. That's a goal that might not be a priority for today's predominantly white institutions.
When Eddie Robinson and Jake Gaither, as well as these many other great black coaches, when they went to recruit young men to come to their colleges, they would promise the family, your son's going to graduate, your son's going to go to class, your son's going to go to church. And I've met a lot of these players now in their 70s, 80s, some even in their early 90s. And to a person, they said that was the message they understood, that the football scholarship wasn't a way to get to the NFL. The football scholarship was a way to be the first one in your family to ever go to college and to get a college degree. And these coaches were absolutely fixated on making sure that that happened, tracking the players' attendance, tracking how they did in class, making sure they got up in the morning to have breakfast at the cafeteria, making sure they went to church. Graduation rates were incredibly high, and the life outcomes for these players, as I've seen now, because I've met them later in their lives, were exceptionally positive. And, Yeah, some did go to the pros as players, some ended up as coaches or front office execs, but some became ministers, some became teachers, some became travel agents, some, became insurance agents, some became musicians. Whatever they've done, they've been successful at because of what they got out of their college experience. And when black players began to get recruited by white schools, they were seen just as commodities. You use them up, you leave them on the side of the road when you're done. If they happen to get a degree at the end, gee, that's great. The sad rule, which Eddie Robinson foresaw, is that the black player wouldn't be seen as a student athlete. He wouldn't be seen as someone who has a mind and an intellectual future. He'd just be seen as some meat to throw on the field.
Again, James Shaq Harris.
I think the majority of the players today go to class, focus on their studies, but I think there are so many that are athletic students, and they're just focused on pro ball, and I think it still needs to be more work in reaching some of the young people who are going to college to just excel in athletics, so that they can become, better citizens, better success stories if pro football doesn't work.
I've read several articles of the student athlete that is like the part that you just described, where they're just really putting all their chips on the athletic part and not really on the education or the life skills part. How do you feel about that?
I feel that is a problem, but I think we don't publicize enough those student athletes who go to college for the right reason. We never talk about that group. We talk about the group that end up with negative stories, they end up not being successful. But I think the number that are being successful is way more. And if we start publicizing those stories, then it may enhance others wanting to be like some of the positive stories that we hear about.
James Shaq Harris never got to play in a Super Bowl, but he got dang close. In 1974, he took a 10-4 LA Rams all the way to the NFC Championships, where Los Angeles lost to Minnesota. After missing a chance at the Super Bowl, Harris was selected for the Pro Bowl, where he was chosen as MVP. The next year, Shaq was named team captain, and the Rams went 12-2, though they lost again in the NFC title game with Shaq injured. You'd think that after all the wins, all the touchdown passes, a Pro Bowl MVP, and consecutive trips to the conference championship, that this would translate into job security, right? Here's Sam Friedman.
Even after James Harris had these two outstanding seasons with the LA Rams and had the great support of their head coach and had been elected team captain by his teammates, the owners of the Rams, basically pulling rank on their own head coach, went and brought in 4 different white quarterbacks to try to take Harris's job away. And when none of them could beat him out for the job, the Rams just traded him away. No one trades away an all-pro quarterback who's 28 years old in the peak of his career and has taken the team to within one game of the Super Bowl 2 years in a row. That doesn't happen to white quarterbacks. If you're the first black quarterback, that's what happens to you.
And as far as you know, would you say that was racism in the management, or was just the fact that there was so much antipathy towards this black quarterback that it was just too much of a problem and they made a business decision? What do you think?
I can't come to any conclusion other than the fact it was racism in the Rams ownership and top management that would lead them to first bring in a whole series of white quarterbacks, Joe Namath, Ron Jaworski, Pat Hayden, Vince Ferragamo, all to try to beat out James Harris, and then to trade him away when he's really at the height of his career. There's no other logic to it.
Was it racism that sidelined James Shaq Harris at the height of his career? Only the Rams owners and managers know in their hearts. But if it's something that still troubles Harris, he seems to hide it well. It certainly hasn't diminished his love for the game or his gratitude for being able to play in the NFL. After his playing career ended, Harris took up front office executive positions with Tampa Bay, the New York Jets, Baltimore, Jacksonville, and Detroit. He officially retired from the NFL in February 2015. So, what do you think? Do any of you remember when James Shaq Harris played football? And has athletics helped you think any differently about race in America? And what are your thoughts about Colin Kapernick and other NFL players silently protesting during the national anthem? If you disagree with their manner of protest, how would you suggest they raise awareness to racial injustice? Can you let us know on Facebook or on Twitter? Our handle is @UsThemPodcast. You've been listening to Us and Them. This show was produced by Julia Weatherall, Mitch Hanley, and me, Trey Kay, and was edited by the redoubtable Cousin B. Joni Deutsch is our digital producer. Special thanks to Jerry Eisenberg for permitting us to use the clip from his film Grambling College, 100 Yards to Glory, and to Brian Davis of CBS Sports for his archival assistance. And we'd also like to thank the USC Annenberg Media for use of their broadcast studios. Michael Lipton and Tristan Lozow wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. Rita Krisafi and Mariana Trofimova designed our website at usandthempodcast.com and provide us with images for the web. The wonderful people at PRX, the Public Radio Exchange, and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation. We'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
From PRX.